Okay, this is Terror Tuesday, The Innocents. Terror Tuesday, just as a little introduction to that, this is an idea that I'm sort of testing out, whereby we read a horror book or watch a horror movie, and then we talk about it, sort of book or movie club style, for a little bit. And then we have a writing workshop portion inspired by the movie or the book. And so for this initial edition of Terror Tuesday, and it might be the last. I don't know. We'll see. It's definitely the first. This first edition of Terror Tuesday, we are going to be talking about The Innocents, which is a gothic ghost story from 1961, starring Deborah Carr. Uh, the way this is going to go is we're going to talk about the movie for like 30 or 40 minutes, and then we will talk about the writing workshop portion of it. We will break off into groups on Discord to like actually do the writing, and then we'll reconvene to share what we wrote, and that'll be it. So I want to kick off with The Innocents, though. So The Innocents, for people who haven't seen it, if you're watching this video and you've not seen The Innocents, I don't recommend continuing to watch this video unless you don't care about spoilers. But basically, it's an adaptation of The Turn of the Screw, one of many adaptations of The Turn of the Screw. Most recently, people will probably be familiar with the Netflix series, The Haunting of Bly Manor, right? It is about a, a governess who goes to work in a country manor called Bly Manor in the employ of a incredibly disinterested man, a man who's very, very uninterested in his niece and nephew, and wants someone to deal with them. Hires this governess to go take care of them and their education. So she goes to Bly Manor. Deborah Carr, we're meant to believe, is in her 20s, but she's clearly not during the filming of that movie. And she gives quite a performance, which we might talk about in a bit. But anyway, Deborah Carr's character, Miss Giddens, gets there and discovers that there's more going on at Bly Manor than she was led to believe. There is, for example, the death of the prior governess. There is suggestions of a very unsavory character from the past that the maid makes reference to but does not elaborate on. She meets one of her charges, the young Flora, who is a weird bug slash lizard girl. We love those characters. And then later, the real turning point in the movie is when Flora's brother Miles shows back up at Bly Manor, having been expelled from the boarding school he was at. They never really quite go into why he was expelled. It's implied a little bit, but it's never really stated out loud what it is. But in any case, the governess is really distraught by this. She's distraught by some things that she sees. She believes she's seeing ghosts on the manor, or she initially thinks they're just like intruders, but then she very quickly just comes to the conclusion that they're ghosts, and proceeds to engage in about an hour worth of shaking the children down for clues, and getting nowhere, and ultimately it ends very tragically for poor Miles. I say poor Miles, that's definitely in quotes because Miles is a little fucking weirdo. So that's the basic arc of the story. I think I want to kick off with this movie's like the surface level stuff with the visuals, because I think this is really, really quite a striking movie, yeah, visually speaking. What did everyone think of just like the production of it, the look of it? And anybody wants to chime in?
It was gorgeous. It was really
I can
nice.
understand.
Yeah.
I can understand why it's like sort of a standard of that era. It's just the production value is just off the charts as far as just that angular gothic romantic vibe. It's very well done.
I was reading about how they did the lighting in some of this stuff where it's like it's so stark and so dark on the outsides, and like they had like super bright lights. The crew had to wear sunglasses apparently. Yeah. It's like doing what they could do back then to get that like really high contrast look was so good.
I watched the video essay on it, and they were saying how it was done in CinemaScope. The director was initially pissed off about that, but then decided to kind of run with it because it allowed him to give like depth and like like the fishbowl effect that he could fuzz at the edges to give a claustrophobic but yet like zoomed out view of it, like kind of like, like when you see the weird effect of the dolly zoom, but like, with this cinemascope effect, and like the proportion was different from how other movies were made. So it was like, the 239 or something like that, whereas like other movies are usually like 189 or something like that. And it just changed the scope of the film. And so therefore, like, when she's going down these darkened hallways, it's like, they fuzzed out those edges to give that look of, you can see depth, but then like you're really honing in on her. And then like when he pushes in for those close-ups, then like, you see her like right there, but then it's like anybody that's behind her or things that could be hinted at behind her are put in a different perspective. So I mean, like visually, yeah, I mean, like it was a really fantastic film. And I don't really watch a whole hell of a lot of black and whites, but I mean, like, that was just very sharp, very well done. I mean, it's in some ways like a lot better than some of the HD, full K, like 4K color movies that we see now. So,
I watched
um,
it on Blu-ray, and let me tell you, I mean, I don't know how it was on YouTube or whatever, everywhere else everybody else watched it, but on Blu-ray, the shadows were so deep and so
Mhm.
black, and like,
yeah,
I mean, almost like oppressive. Like it felt like the shadows were just swallowing like the scenes, right? I mean, it was a really cool effect.
There's a really great moment that I was like, oh, this is top tier, where you first, not no, it's the second time you see Peter, and he's in the window and she's playing hide and go seek.
Mhm.
And just the way they light it, they make his eyes look like pinholes.
Oh yeah,
And it's
yeah.
so creepy
Hmm.
and it's so good just with the way that they form the shadows around it. It was just like, this is great stuff.
Yeah. Amanda, were you gonna say something?
Oh, it was all just in agreement with what everybody else said about the way the contrast worked and the way the camera was working. It made everything feel really oppressive. You never really got a good handle on what the house looked like or
Yeah,
what the layout was or
yes,
anything.
like they would be like in rooms and you could not really get a pinpoint on like what the room was or where it
Yeah,
was
that's
or
what I was
how
gonna
big
say.
it
It reminds
was.
me of The
Yeah.
Shining, stuff like that, where you're like it's a very expansive place and like you're not exactly sure where they are at all
Yeah.
times, but it's
Hmm.
also extremely claustrophobic. It's like this
Hmm.
weird contradiction of like,
Yeah, it's big but small. Yeah, like
They
yeah,
almost
cramped.
never showed
Yeah.
any exits. That's one
Yeah.
thing I really
Yeah.
noticed. They never really showed a lot of
Yeah.
doors or
Mm.
even a lot of like if they did show windows, they had big curtains over them or they were
yeah.
Hmm.
clearly overlooking something high up. There was never really a sense of, oh, I can get out of here.
There were a couple of
It
instances I noticed where when Deborah Carr like walks into a room and the shadows from like the window frames or whatever, like they looked like bars over her
Mhm.
face, and I loved
Mhm.
that. I was like, oh, it looks like she's in prison, you know?
Well, that's a
Like,
big theme in the movie, isn't it? It's just like the idea of being trapped.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That,
Yeah.
that atmospheric sense of isolation, I think, is juxtaposed with those beautiful panoramic pastoral scenes of the grounds. And even
Mhm.
when she's driving in, you get this wonderful English countryside that looks so wide open and beautiful. And then you come into this dark maze, right? And the isolation just closes in around you with those push-pull shots. Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite lines, because I was making notes as for tonight, so I had things to reference. But one of my favorite lines is when Flora goes, "Big rooms get bigger at night," and I think
Oh
that like
yeah, yeah.
it's just this
Yeah, it's
idea
a
of like
great line. Yeah.
spacelessness of expansiveness that you're not sure of. But
Flora said cosmic horror, and yeah. Okay, so I think we can all. It seems like we all agree that the movie was pretty striking, and it really, really was. I think, and I actually think that's probably like 50% of the movie's power. You know, if I'm being honest. That said, we can start to move into more like substantive discussion because I think it's really interesting. I know the story super well because I did a paper on the turn of the screw. And so I know the story really well. I'd seen the movie. I watched it again last night, but I'd seen it before. And I've seen adaptations of it as well. And I'm curious, like, I'm really curious, like, what people think is happening in this story. We're not meant to know precisely, right? Like the ambiguity is obviously part of it, but I'm just really, I'd love to get a read on what people think was actually going on in like with Miss Giddens, with Miles especially. Like, what do we think is happening in The Innocents?
I mean, obviously, it's extremely ambiguous.
Yeah.
Like, it's supposed to be ambiguous. Like,
Yep.
that's just the
Yeah.
point of it. Most versions of the turn of the screw I've seen are not nearly as ambiguous as this one is. This one was very clearly leaning on that very heavily to good effect.
Mhm.
So it really is one of the few times enjoying this, story where I did feel like, oh no, there's no ghost. She's just
Yeah.
she's just losing it.
I do think they were kind of, maybe more so than other adaptations, they were definitely leaning a little bit more on like, she's the problem, I think.
Yeah.
Like, like especially towards the end. But yeah.
I
The
think I
whole
read
house
that.
was weird, but she was the weirdest part.
Yeah.
I think I read a lot of that ambiguity was added in by Capote during his rewrite. It wasn't in the present.
Interesting.
Yeah. He said the one thing that he added that he regretted was the teardrop that fell on the paper in the schoolroom. Is like, oh, that like ruined the whole thing, because that's the only thing that's not ambiguous.
Yeah, that throws you off.
It
a
didn't
bit.
ruin it. Like
Yeah.
maybe she was crying or whatever, but I see what the
Maybe
That's
the
really
schoolhouse
interesting,
wasn't
though,
in good
because
repair.
I actually think it's really interesting, and it kind of makes the movie stand out from other movies in its era, because I think that like that sort of like ambiguity probably wouldn't be tolerated so much by audiences. I don't know. Maybe I'm not giving audiences of that era enough credit, but I think it's really interesting. I actually thought that some of the movie's power was sapped a little bit. One, by Deborah Carr's performance, which I'm not a giant fan of. I mean, I like it like in a camp way, but I don't love it in a sort of like horror way. I don't know. But also the fact that I kind of felt like too much was made of Mrs. Jessel, and like seeing Mrs. Jessel and seeing Quint at the window. Like, I think it would have been more powerful if like we had just seen them, but like they wouldn't have been remarked upon anymore, like, but instead we get these like long conversations between the governess and Miss Gross, about it. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I don't know. Anyway.
Well, I think that like her performance especially is what sort of made it, like it tilted me towards the idea of just her sort of being paranoid and insane, because it's like it's a very over the top performance. There's nothing subtle about it. It's very like
it's so big. Yeah.
It's so big.
And I don't even know if it's I don't read it as paranoid or insane. I read it as more like childlike. Like she's kind of matching the energy of what she expects the children would be like.
Oh, that's
like,
interesting.
When
her first job.
Yeah,
her first job, she was
her first job at age 45.
And when you're kids, you make up these stories, and you're like, oh, like this is how it is, and she like immediately jumped to like, oh, we just have to get them to admit what is going on, and it'll all be fixed. Like,
right?
She's
but
like in imagination time this entire time. I found that really an interesting angle.
That's an interesting angle. Yeah,
because she was also mentioning how it's like at home with her father being the minister or whatever, and that he like you were supposed to be quiet at home, and so it sounds to me like when she told the uncle that yes, I have an imagination, it's like you heard that as like I'm still a kid, I'm still like thinking of ways to be I love the children and I want to have fun with them, and I'm like not an adult in whatever sense of the word.
Well, did you see how she was at the very beginning of the movie when she was talking to the uncle about even getting employed? She was like a love-struck kid.
Exactly.
She was like a love-struck teenager. Her eyes were wide, and like she looked like she was ready to, if he said so, she would run away with him.
I wonder if there was something intentional in the casting of Deborah Carr then, because she's clearly much older than that, and like
well, it was originally supposed to be Kim Novak, wasn't it?
I don't know, but this was like fairly late in Deborah Carr's career, and like she's at that time was probably an older working actress as far as that goes. And it's interesting that like she's so transparently an older actress, but she's playing this like kind of like dewy-eyed, like, or kind of like your doe-eyed, like kind of innocent woman. I found that really intriguing, and I wonder if it was intentional, but I don't know. How old was Kim Novak at that time?
I don't know. I think she was also older though, which is
Yeah,
why.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice.
Yeah, I have a third opinion about her character. I don't think she's like all that sort of childlike, nor is she going insane. I think she's like, oh God, there's something wrong with these children, and I have to help them out. And any way she can, but she just doesn't know how.
She does it
She
wrong.
I've met people like her in real life and
Mhm.
had them as teachers, and they are the worst.
She is
I
kind of the
definitely think she's
worst.
naive. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's bad. Like I don't like to me she's the menace of the movie in my opinion.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
she's the
100%.
bad
the
guy.
scariest part.
Yeah,
for me.
100%.
This is why I don't think The Innocents is a horror movie. It is a tragedy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like I think I was up to a point where she says, "Oh, I think that the moment when she says finding out the backstory of the affair and what, and like, oh God, they were using the children, was when I realized, oh, the ghosts, they're not real. This is just her imagination. This is just her trying to fix the problem in any way she can think of. She is going to get a kid killed." And well, yeah, that happened.
Yeah, well, it's interesting though because like, how did Miles die? You know,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
was
like,
curious about that too. I don't
yeah,
get it.
Well,
like, you know,
he was being chased by her, and honestly, it was an accident. But she was antagonizing him. He ran away, thinking like it's a game, and then he fell down the stairs. Now,
Okay.
Yeah, just like
well,
Quint.
yeah,
I understood it. Like, I got the. I mean, I know it's like I think it's a little ambiguous. Like, I got the impression that we were meant to believe that he died from the violence of the exorcism, right?
Yeah,
like, of
that's what I
having
got.
Quint,
Like,
of
it's-
having Quint exorcised from him and he died. You know,
Yeah,
Like,
because you
know?
see Quint up atop. Like it's not like this.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think the goal of the filmmakers was like, no, this is actually a haunting. But
yeah, but they do. But there's enough ambiguity that
I think you
because
can take it both ways. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Ken, I know you're a big fan of this movie. I'd love to get your thoughts on the substance of this movie.
I find that her transformation throughout the whole film is almost like a devolution of her. Even her costume changes from light colors to dark colors,
Mhm.
and her mannerisms and her hysteria increase. And I've always thought that it was more deeply tied to her sexual repression.
Yes.
That's what the book is about, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, yeah.
But you know, there's some particular poignant moments. Like even when Miles gets sent from boarding school, we only know through Mrs. Gross that it's because of bad influence on other boys,
Mhm.
right? And so I was always left wondering, is Quint had some sort of pedophilia relationship with Miles?
I think we're meant to believe
I think
that.
there is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Right.
because there's
Yeah.
a scene where you see him walking into the room with Jessup and Flora dancing, and he's walking Miles in the same way. And I think, yeah, I think there's supposed to be some of that like going on. Like, I haven't read the book, so I don't know if it's like in the book, but it felt very.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always thought Miss Giddens was reacting and maybe having a breakdown in response to her naivety being
Yeah.
shattered. Coming
Yeah,
into
like
the
she
West
can't
End.
believe this is happening.
And
Yeah,
she
like
can't
that
believe
a
that this is
monster
just-
like Quint would do that. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
she
yeah.
starts seeing shit everywhere.
Yeah.
And we're not sure if it's actually happening or not. And that could explain away why the children behave in such a strange way.
Yeah,
There's
I
also
wrote
like
a
the shock of like of when she's talking with Mrs. Gross about like, oh, the children saw it, you know, like this idea that like Quint was just overrunning the house and being this monster to everybody, and just everyone was just sort of like having to deal with it and accept it.
I wrote a literary criticism of The Turn of the Screw in college, and my whole theory of the case was that basically, and I think this is more apparent in the book maybe than the movie, but because Capote's involvement in the movie, it makes me think it might be a connection there too. But my whole theory of the book was that this was Henry James like working through his own homosexuality, and like but through this sort of lens of like Victorian era repression, right? And Miss Giddens represents like the sort of like fragile Victorian mindset when it comes to sex and sexuality, right? And like, and that Miles is like this sort of like, you know, the poor boy who is, you know, caught up in, you know, in his confused sexual awakening or whatever, right? Like I think there's a little bit of that movie. I do tend to agree with Ken that like you can interpret Deborah Carr's reaction as one of like, she's so horrified by the possibility that Quint, you know, assaulted Miles that she breaks and she can't cope with it she just can't cope, you know, which I find really intriguing. I mean, I find that it's an interesting angle to view the movie.
Does anybody
through.
remember in the movie if I'm trying to recall bits and pieces, but does anybody recall Miles actually telling Miss Giddens that she's projecting?
No.
Okay.
He didn't say it in so many words. He did call her a dirty-minded hag.
Yeah.
And a dirty-minded hag.
Like if she thinks that way, it makes her face look ugly, right?
You know,
Like,
he did say that.
Yeah.
He's like,
Yeah, don't worry. You don't want to be one of those bespectacled girls.
What do we think about
But
the
just
fact
before
that
all of that, he did tell her that because of her being so afraid, he asked her, did she scare off all of the other servants because of her fear?
Yeah. What did we all think about the fact that in pretty much every scene they're in together, Miles is 100% flirting with Miss Giddens? I mean, it is really disturbing. Yeah,
Freaking
it's so
creepy. God
Like-
dang.
But I think what Ken was saying is kind of like you know, sort of hinting at that weird kind of relationship with sexuality. It's like it, you know, if you know, in a really dark way, if that's all you sort of know, you don't know how to behave with people in a regular way. And so like if he had gotten kicked out because he got kicked out of school for talking. And
Right.
you know,
Yes. Yeah.
and so what was he talking about?
What
to
was
the
he
other
talking
boys?
about? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Maybe the things that
exactly.
Mr. Quint taught him, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have to say, I think setting aside the poem scene, which I think is one of the scariest scenes in all of movies. It's so scary, and just so good. Like I love that. I want to like bottle that moment and sell it in role playing game form. But like, I'm setting that scene aside. The scene, the horseback riding scene, is so goddamn creepy, and that little boy gives the most amazing performance because he says one line where he says, I didn't know you were watching me. And he says it in a way that's so flirty and so creepy. And like my skin crawled when he said that line. I was like, oh, Miles, stop. Like it was, I don't know. It was great. Like that little boy really turned in a performance. I mean, big time.
I think both him and Flora, like they bring the whole thing together perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Flora does too. Yeah, in her way. Yeah,
Especially
absolutely.
I mean, that's some of the best child acting I've ever seen.
Well, it's interesting that I think that their performances are better than Deborah Carr's.
Absolutely, 1000%.
Yeah, they had to be, right? I mean, like 'cause it felt like they were playing dual characters to also add to the ambiguity.
Like
But
they
what
had
was
way more
even more
subtlety and peaks and valleys than Deborah Carr did. Deborah Carr was on 11 the whole time. Like
what's even funnier is the fact that really awesome child actor. I think he only had a couple more years and then one more movie in him, and then he became an architect.
Yeah, he did Village of the Damned, and then this, and then like one other movie, and I think that was it. I don't think he did anything else. So yeah.
And I think the children's performance kind of being so mature, excuse me, also kind of puts her performance into that contrast of her being super
she's so
enthusiastic and
hot,
wide-eyed.
yeah.
And the kids are just like, be cool, man.
Which it had to be intentional, right? Like I don't know how you make a movie that's going for these like subtle ambiguities and these sort of like these weird angles, and also gets that incredible line out of that little boy, not to mention the poem reading and all that stuff, and then they let Deborah Carr do that performance. Like it felt intentional, like it had to be intentional to some degree, right? Maybe it is the contrast, I don't know.
Yeah, like outside of the very obvious flirting, I didn't find either of the kids to be that creepy, because it just reminded me a lot of like my friends growing up and in my family. Like traumatized kids act a lot different than kids with a happy upbringing. These kids are fucked up.
They're
from the
very
get-go.
fucked up
Yeah.
kids. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
fucked up, and like so like I was never really scared of them. I was more horrified about like the stuff that was implied that happened to
Oh yeah,
them.
well that's the scary part,
Yes,
right? Like I don't
yeah,
think
exactly.
they
Yeah.
themselves are not, I don't think inherently scary. Miles, I think Miles is a little bit, but especially during the poem, during the reading of the poem. But like because when he says, like when he whispers, welcome my lord, like when he whispers that, like oh, just like chills down my back. But no, I agree. Like it's the situation, right? As as they say on It's
Yeah.
Always Sunny, it's the situation,
Yeah, I do think Miles was actually intending to like fuck around with that scene, like he wanted to be creepy. So like
Oh, you think it was intentional? Oh, that's
yeah,
interesting.
because like he
yeah.
wanted to be, he didn't want to be perceived as a child anymore, and like
Mm.
I think here's also another thing that like I'm not totally, because again like I keep on thinking, was she perceiving everything correctly?
Well, that's
Because of
yeah, it's interesting, right?
because like there was the ghosts, and I don't think the ghosts were real. Was she also perceiving Miles correctly?
Mm.
Was he an actual
that's
child, or was he more of like a teenager?
Maybe it's a
Because that-
reliable narrator problem. Okay.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
that's like
The
sort of
book
an
certainly
issue.
has that problem, right? The book is like a classic of like unreliable narrator, right? I mean,
and that she's perceiving him as a child and like infantizing him, and that like he's acting out and like being very aggressively sexual with her, trying to be a bad kid to just get her to react differently, just to
I
care.
felt like he was acting like his uncle in miniature.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was acting like he was the lord of the
Yes.
manor. Like he
Yeah.
was
Like
he kept calling her my dear, like they were married.
I totally get that from the story that like that's Quint's influence, because he was a little,
Yeah.
he's
Right,
that
he like even
shadow.
shushes her in the carriage. He's like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. Like, just chill out." Like, he's
It I think the uncle is also gay. Just
absolutely.
because like he's like, I don't want to deal with the family. I want to be this sort of permanent bachelor, and like the sort of parallels between it is just sort of emphasizing, okay, you have this gay character, and then you have this budding character of their own sexuality, trying to figure out their way on the world. So like that is just a very interesting.
Well, and knowing Truman Capote's involvement, you have to leave space for these interpretations, right? You have to.
Yeah.
Like there's no like you don't get Truman Capote to do an adaptation of The Turn of the Screw and not contend with the possibilities, these the subtext, right? I mean, it's impossible. Fantastic. Okay, so we'll talk about the movie for just a few more minutes, then we'll start doing the writing part. Favorite scenes? Anybody want to say their favorite scene? Mine, I think everybody knows mine. Mine is the reading of the poem. But yeah.
Poem is probably one of my favorites as well. It's so powerful. It just punches you.
It really does. It's like just it's pure terror.
I love Floor in the Gazebo. There's
Yes.
a couple things with that.
Mhm.
One, there's a couple of different scenes where Deborah Carr is below the children, either because she's crouched down or the children are on higher ground. In that case, Floor is walking along the railing of the gazebo. But it's also where you really see the lengths that Miss Giddens will go to just escalate, like just no de-escalate, whatsoever.
No.
Yeah, it will just antagonize Floor until she just breaks down, and it's like, see, I told you the children.
She's
are messed
totally
up.
abusing Flora in this scene, right? 100%. Yeah.
That was gonna be my pick for another scene, was just like when she like snaps, and like you see it's sort of like leaning into what Kayak was saying about her not actually being creepy in the movie, just sort of being traumatized. You see that real break when she finally has to deal with the antagonism, and she has to let everything out, and she's just wailing throughout the rest of the movie.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I also really liked I forgot her name, but the maid, like
Mrs.
when
Gross.
Mrs. Gross, when she's like talking to our main character and saying like, no, I didn't see any ghosts there.
Yeah.
That was just great, and I love that.
I think Mrs. Gross is the hero of this movie.
Oh yes, 400%
Don't we think?
sure.
Yeah, I mean, she's truly like the hero of this. Not the hero in the sense that she does anything active to help to save the kids or anything, but I think she's
She got Flora out of there.
Yeah, she takes the kid away.
that's true. She's the most sympathetic character though, right? Like she's the most
But she's
like you know.
she gets Flora out there like under the orders
Yeah.
of this. She's a lackey. She's like a servant of the master. She's like she does not like. It's interesting. She's like, I think her performance is really good because she's playing this line of like, I don't know anything. Oh, I do know lots of things. Like I'm complicit. Oh no, I'm not. Like I don't.
Yeah.
I didn't see any ghosts. You don't know really where she stands for the whole movie. And
That's
and
true.
That, I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
that's a
like
good
one of my
point.
favorite scenes in the-
She also she holds back information and she prevents Gibbons from going to the vicar because she wants to keep it all hush hush.
Oh,
She
that's
doesn't
true.
want
She
people
does,
talking
doesn't
about
she?
oh, this
Yeah.
family, they have all this going on. It's
Oh.
she's trying to enforce that social order.
Mm.
I've always seen her as the servant of the house,
Yeah.
not
Mhm.
the best
Yeah.
Yeah.
kids. Just the house, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's
if there's
interesting.
pedophilia happening, she was telling her that they were doing it in all the rooms, and she would have been totally aware of what was going on in the house and didn't say a word and lift a finger.
I mean, I guess she's a hero that way. She's maintaining the status quo as much as she can. So
She's almost like the avatar of the house in some sense, right?
Yeah.
Of this
Yeah.
unknowable
Yeah.
house,
Yeah.
right? Okay, other favorite scenes? Like before any other
I
scenes
did
you
like
want to
the
highlight?
scene a lot at the very, very beginning. While I was watching it, I didn't really understand why it was being filmed or why everybody was acting the way they did. Between the governess, whose name I can't remember right now, and the
Students.
uncle. Thank
Mhm.
you. The way that they were interacting and the way that the camera was focusing on her and the weird, like everything felt kind of weird about that whole scene. But after having watched the rest of the movie, it made a lot more sense. It was establishing her as this naive, unreliable
Yeah.
character who was very quick to jump into her emotions, quick to jump
Mhm.
into her her immediate thoughts. Like what you're saying with the escalating, there's no de-escalation there.
Mhm.
Even in that scene there was no de-escalation, and I was like, why do they even have this scene? You don't need this. You can get the context of the uncle not being there by just not having him in the house.
Yeah, she could
That's
just
easy.
arrive. Yeah.
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 What's this scene for? But then as I thought about it later, I'm like, oh, it makes perfect sense now. It's to add to that ambiguity, to see, like, is she in her complete faculties?
Mhm. Mhm.
I can imagine that when it was shown in 1961, that scene where she finally succumbs to the madness of the whispers in the hallway at midnight with the clutched candelabra must have been terrifying for audience.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was my scariest thing.
It's a creepy scene. I mean, just the
Yeah.
shadows are doing so much work in that scene. The lighting, oh my god, it's like I don't think I've seen. I mean, probably the closest thing is that I've seen in recent years is probably just other Gothic horror movies, like
Yeah.
like the others
Well, they're all
or
pulling
whatever,
from
right?
that scene,
You know?
right? Like I think
Yeah,
like what was it, Crimson Peak or whatever? I feel like Crimson Peak was made from that scene. Like for a long
yeah.
time while
The
we're walking down
others is
hallway.
like very clearly influenced by this,
Yeah.
right? Like okay, fabulous. Any other closing thoughts about The Innocents, 1961?
It wasn't a scene, but there's a couple like visual themes that were really nicely dropped in. When she like touched the flowers at the beginning and the petals fell off,
Yeah.
and Miss
Oh,
Gross is like,
yeah.
"Oh yeah, don't worry about it, does that." And like 2/3 of the movie later, I think it was like when she put down a letter or something on a table. There's just one shot of like a petal like falling, and then they cut away from it. They don't like linger on it or anything. It's just like,
Mhm.
"Oh yeah, this is the thing that happens." And I was just like, "Oh no, what does that mean?" But there are a few things like that where it's like, "Oh, like there's some repetition of visual themes here, but they don't like linger on them and like make a deal out of them." It was really, really interesting.
Yeah, I love that.
Final
Sound design. I mean, like,
Mhm.
the theme that was made specifically for the movie, like "Oh Willow Wayley." I mean, that
Oh, the song.
every
We haven't
single
talked about
time
the song. That song
every
is
single
so
time it
creepy.
comes
Yeah.
up, it creeps the fuck out, and it's just wonderful. And then like on certain scenes, it's the music she hears, and
Mhm.
then some kind of atmospheric buzz or hum or rush of
Mhm.
wind, and
Mhm.
then dead silence.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
it's like listening to a beautiful piece of music where it's like pauses are done with very deliberate care and really, really emphasize when the music swells or when the sound really comes to the fore, and it's just a wonderful study of like the movie sounds are with along with the song motif are music in themselves, because
Mhm.
it's like, again, it's got some rises and it's got some dips, and it's
Yeah, it's a
I feel
very
like the
creepy
scene where
song.
she saw Quinn on the tower, like when the
Yes.
sound completely drops out for
Yes.
like 20 seconds or whatever. I think that is the turning point in the movie where she's like, okay, now the ghost shit is on. And then she like snaps back and everything's almost deafening. It's just normal noise levels again. That was like a really strong turn in the movie.
It felt like a tinnitus moment or something like that
Oh,
to
yeah,
me. It was
yeah,
just like,
yeah.
because it was like buzzing, but then, like, she was disoriented from the, I guess, the sun glare or
Mhm.
whatever, and then, like, she saw Quint, and then what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
So, before we go, I do think we should remark briefly upon like the appearance of the various appearances of Miss Jessel and Quint, and particularly that first appearance by both of them, like really,
Mhm.
really, really
Mhm.
like good filmmaking, very, very creepy. And I also want to like pose the question, because this is going to be important for the workshop. What do we suppose is the major theme of this movie? Like, what do we think is the theme? Because that might be the theme we want to lean on in the workshop as well.
For
Is it
me, the big
innocence?
theme. Oh, go
Sorry.
on. No, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say it's an innocence, because it's interesting like how like they're talking about like are the kids innocent, and then like they posted Mrs. Gross like, are you innocent? And then we're
Innocence is a
talking
good
about like,
theme. Yeah.
is Miss
Naivete,
Gibbons
innocence.
innocent?
Yeah.
It's like I feel like there's this weird interpretation where like, sexual repression, and she's like sort of making
Yeah.
out this house to be this scene. So I don't know. I feel like that's like the big obvious one to me, but there might be a deeper one that's actually going on.
I think that might be good for our purposes. Innocence as a theme is pretty good.
Yeah,
me,
I
the
think with
big
naivete
theme.
is a stronger word for it, because it's less
Yeah.
just like not being aware of things, but like kind of not being aware of things, but making assumption about things based on what you know already, which is not the full picture.
Yeah, yeah.
I always thought of it as sort of loss, right? Because it's a loss of innocence, a loss of sort of the sexual naivety that she has, or the repression that she seems to be going into it with. And then there's also the loss of the lives of Quint and the governess.
Yeah.
And you have this loss of her sanity over the course of the film as well. So
Interesting. Interesting.
So my
think-
take is more along the lines of imprisonment and being trapped.
Yeah.
On a surface level, it's very obvious. Like that's a big theme. Like with Flora playing with the spider in the web, like, and
Yeah. Oh, that was a good scene too. Yeah.
yeah, I love that.
little
And like
moment.
even the
Yeah.
way it's shot with like the superimposed background.
Yeah.
But even, on a more subtextual layer, I mean, the idea of repression as a prison, as something that you have to be trapped, that you have to break free from. And they were all trapped and imprisoned by Quint at one point. They were all at his mercy.
Yeah.
And the idea that even she, like everyone in that house is at their mercy. This is a place where the uncle just dumps everybody. Like he does not go there. He just leaves them there and they just while away. And this is their prison. And the idea of
bleak.
like,
it's bleak when you put it that way.
yeah, well, that is like the idea of big rooms getting bigger. Like their prison enlarges at night, and it's disorienting and it's beautiful. But you are not getting out of here.
Yeah,
And clearly, Miles is not getting out of here. He thought he got out of there with going to school, but he had to come back, and he was never going to come out of that.
So I think all of those make good. Those are all great suggestions for themes. They all. We can play with all of those things. I think they're all very salient for our purposes. So I've shared a document in Discord called Old King's Mule. If you want to pull that PDF up really quickly, what I've done is I've written the first part of a between threat, and we are going to write the rest of it in groups. And so I'm not telling a direct retelling of The Turn of the Screw or this movie. It is mostly just clearly inspired by, but not a direct retelling of that story. And so I will read it aloud for people watching the video. So this one is a little bit like the Selkie threat, if people know the Selkie threat, in that it takes place in the country and it kind of freezes all the other threats in play. This conversation assumes you know how the between works. I'm not going to talk about how the between works on this. So this threat takes place in the country. Only one threat in the country can be active at a time. While Old King's Mule is in play, all other active threats are paused and no new threats can be introduced. Clues cannot be gathered for other threats, but the hunters can still find mastermind clues. Additionally, the dusk phase and night phase are somewhat different while Old King's, all my typos, while Old King's Mule is active. During the dusk phase, pose the following paint the scene. Our manor is called Scarwick Manor. It is a grand old house, dark and easy to get lost in. The legends surrounding it suggest that the house likes to drink the light. What do you experience that confirms this? So that's just to kind of play with the darkness stuff of the movie. During the night phase, use the unseen prompt included with this threat. Not yet written, but there will be one. Here's the presentation. Hargrave House recently received a letter from a gentleman named Sheridan Knowles. In his letter, Mr. Knowles explained that some weeks ago, the governess he had hired to look after his niece and nephew, Miss Anna Gibney, was found floating face down in the pond on his country estate of Scarwick. The local constable declared that Miss Gibney's death was a suicide, but Mr. Knowles has come to believe something more sinister is at play, for reasons not the least of which are the fact that Miss Gibney seemed very happy with her life and position. Knowles's nephew, Simon, a boy who, according to Knowles, has an entirely troublesome imagination, claims that Miss Gibney was killed by Old King Smule, the boy's imaginary playmate. Knowles was ready to dismiss this out of hand as the idiotic ramblings one can typically expect of children, but Simon's subsequent behavior gave him pause. The boy has taken to referring to himself as Old King Smule, going so far as to swan around the manor in a tin crown, commanding the servants to do dangerous and demeaning things, and absolutely terrifying his little sister Gloria. Knowles finds the whole situation a great bother, and if not for the fact his niece and nephew have nowhere else to go, he would ship them away and wash his hands of the whole situation. He explains that he has to leave the country on business and hopes that Hargrave House might come down to Scarwick as his guests and get to the bottom of what happened to Miss Gibney. We would pose the following to the hunter with the highest reason. You know that Old King Smule is actually a little-known figure from myth. What about the Old King Smule tale makes you think the boy might actually be possessed by him? Intrigued by the possibility of encountering a spirit from the ancient world, you accepted Mr. Knowles's invitation. After a comfortable carriage ride that takes up most of the morning, you arrive at the gate of Scarwick Manor, where a servant helps you with your bags and escorts you the rest of the way to the house. Here, I would probably, as the keeper, then give a layout of the estate, you know. We have questions and opportunities. Is the spirit of Old King Smule actually present at Scarwick Manor, or is he a figment of Simon's imagination? It unlocks the next question if you answer it. If the spirit of Old King Smule is present at Scarwick Manor, what does it want? Resolve the threat by performing a ritual to banish the spirit or otherwise engaging with it so it is no longer a danger. If the spirit is a figment of Simon's imagination, why did Miss Gibney die? Resolve the threat by revealing the truth to Mr. Knowles via a letter and then tending to the children so they can move on from the trauma of this episode. Now, for the workshop, we are basically going to divide up into four teams of two, basically. And one team will be doing the mask, the threat, and dangers. One will be doing locations. One will be doing side characters. One will be writing that unseen. And everyone will also have to do moments and clues as part of their writing assignment, just so that you have just you get to write a variety of things, not just your assigned thing. I want you to think, obviously, try to make your entries conform to the style of between threats. So, like, side characters should have 3 details in their role in the story and a quote. Locations should have 3 details in the paint scene question, and so forth. For the mask, write an aspect of the Janus mask inspired by some of the themes that we've discussed, or one of them. The threat should be Old King Smule / Simon. Be sure to account for all possibilities in the Q and O's, whether there's really an Old King Smule or not. But in any case, even if there's not, Simon is a danger of some sort, right? You'll also need 3 more dangers. Those can be people, the environment, the house itself, whatever, and a moment and clues. For locations, it's pretty straightforward. Just locations around the manor or in the manor. 2 moments and 4 clues. Side characters, same thing. This is interesting because I think we're going to end up having more characters in the threat than there were in the movie, because the movie is actually pretty limited in terms of characters. But you know, be thinking about what types of characters, like what they represent in the story and how they might function in the story. Because in some sense, Hargrave House is kind of taking the place of Miss Giddens in The Innocents, right? In some sense, except Our version is a little bit more supernaturally heightened, and our version's much more the between than it is a film from the 1960s. The unseen is going to be the trickier task, but I think maybe the really satisfying one to write. You're going to write a special unseen for this threat that has to be usable over multiple night phases, because multiple night phases can take place in Scarwick Manor. And so if you want an example of how that might work, look at the Selkie, because it has a similar unseen. Also a moment and 4 clues. We'll get back together and we'll do rewards together after we share our creations, because the rewards might be implicated or implied by some of the other things that we write. Your writing doesn't have to be like exceptional here. This is not going to be published as soon as we're done. This is mostly just a chance to get together, write some stuff, share it, and then after this, if somebody or some of you want to run with this and make it a thing, you can absolutely do that. But I just thought it'd be fun to have this movie in the back of our minds and do a little writing inspired by it. So I am going to just assign you in groups, because I think that'll be easier than asking you all to do it yourself. And so I'm going to go in the way I see you on the screen. So Ken and Mads are going to be together. Chaotic and Ray are going to be together. Evan and Amanda are going to be together. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 1, 2, 3. And then, I guess we have a group of 3, don't we? We do. Sasha, Jack, and Mark, you will be together. Sasha, Jack, and Mark, I'm going to give you mask, threat, and dangers, because I think that's the most complex one to write of them. So since there's 3 of you, I think that'll be easier. And then I'm going to go with Amanda and Evan. How do you feel about locations? Good. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Awesome. Ray and Chaotic, side characters. You want to write some quotes?
Awesome.
Yeah. And then Mads and Ken, you get to write that unseen, which is kind of like 5 prompts in total, plus the moment and clues. So I will be, I think you should all divide up and either talk to each other on Discord or get a thread going in our channel. Or if you want to just do another Zoom call or Discord call just with your group, you can do that too. I don't really care. If you need me though, tag me in the channel if you have a question and I'll answer your question. Or if you just want some help or some advice or a quote or something. Amanda?
I have questions. How old are Simon and Gloria?
I'm going to say they're between 10 and 12. I think
Okay,
Gloria's
so
the
not
younger.
Yeah, not like teenagers. Or
No.
anything.
They're going to be little kids. Yeah. And yeah. So
Would you say?
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, would you say that Gloria is more maybe a side character or a danger?
I don't know. You tell me. But if
Okay.
you're going to make her a danger, though, you should probably check in with the side character team, because
Got it.
I think you could make it just as easily a case that she's a side character. So
Mhm.
we will go for, let's say we'll go for, let's write for 40 minutes. 40 minutes gives us about half an hour to actually share and do rewards. So we will meet, let's just say we'll meet back up on the hour. Does that sound good?
Mhm.
Okay.
Will
awesome.
you post another link?
I'm just going to pause this.
Okay.
I'm just going to pause this and I'll let you all back in. So.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I'll see you all in 40 minutes ish. Okay, we're back. We have written. It's okay if you didn't finish all the stuff in your prompt. The goal here is just to write and see what we could come up with in the time, and thinking about the movie and its ambiance and effluvia. I'm going to go in the order that just things appear on the threat sheet, and so we might have to bounce around the groups a little bit. But I want to talk first about the aspect of the Janisk mask. What theme did you end up leaning into? What's it called? And what is the prompt? Who from that group wants to talk about it?
I'll get it.
Okay, go ahead.
So our mask is the Mask of the Sealed Chamber.
Ooh.
And each hunter narrates a memory of a time in their childhood when they felt trapped by a secret they had no choice but to keep.
I like it. This is really, really good. We don't often get to experience the hunters as kids.
Yeah.
So that's really good. Yeah, I like it. Fantastic. Love that. Was that it? That's usually all that there is in a mask.
Yeah, that's the only mask.
Okay, yeah. Fantastic. Then let's do the moments now. That's usually what's next on the sheet. So we'll kind of bounce around, and we'll start with the locations group. Read your moments to me.
Okay. We had a shadowy figure with a distinctive but unfamiliar silhouette standing atop a parapet, bathed in moonlight.
Oh, okay. I'm into that. It's pretty good.
Whispers amongst the halls, but around each corner there's no one there.
Very nice. What about the side character group?
Oh wait, no, that was us.
Oh, you're the side character. I thought you were. I was like, wait.
I was panicking for a moment, like, oh no.
Yeah, we were the wrong thing.
I got too excited.
14 locations. There are no side characters. It's fine.
It's just 14. Just tons of. It gets bigger in the dark. It doubles in size in the dark. Fantastic. Okay, well then, locations group. Please give me your moments.
Mandy, you want to take it away?
No, you wrote them. You go ahead.
Okay, fine. A sudden domineering regal figure appears in the distance, causing you to double take. When you fix your eyes back on the figure, it appears to be a gnarled children's doll. The sound of a distant voice calling for Gloria as if beckoning her back home.
Nice. Very nice. Fantastic. And you just had the 2, right? Fantastic. And the unseen group, what was your moment?
Ken, you want to go ahead and do that since you built off of mine? Oh, you're a mute.
Any of them?
The moment with the sparrow.
Oh, right. A massive spider web with a sparrow caught in the center and a spider slowly making its way toward its quarry.
Very nice. Very nice. Love that. And the danger group.
Sasha, you want to read it?
All right, we have you keep hearing a song from your childhood, one that fills you with sorrow, but there's no sign of where it comes from. What does it sound like? You see a figure shrouded in shadows. When you approach, it bursts into spiders.
These are all really good. I think like this threat is ready to we're making good progress on writing this threat. This is really solid. Okay, good. Okay, the next thing then is the threat and the dangers. So here we're going to dig in a little bit. I think probably the most challenging portion of this is the Old King Smule / Simon, in particular, because you have to kind of account for the Q and O's and the possibilities there. So who wants to walk us through the threat? I mean, what have you settled on? It's okay if you didn't write it out in full prose, but I just, if not, I just want to hear the basics of it.
So we settled on Simon because whether or not it's Old King or him, he's the common denominator. And so we have Simon Knowles, head of ice blonde hair topped with an antique tin crown, large eyes filled with shadow black pools, an uncanny smile that borders on malefic. Regardless of whether Old King Smule is real, the manner seems to echo Simon's mood. And when he throws tantrums, the whole house shakes. And then we gave him a quote, which is, I promise you will not come to any harm here at Scarwick Manor, my dear, so long as you obey your king. Now, what game shall we play next?
Fantastic. Bravo. I don't know if you gave it any thought, but what will happen if Hargreave House ignores Old King Smule or Simon? Like, what is the
we wrote if the hunters ignore Simon, if the hunters don't address the threat, harm will come to Gloria, other side characters, and perhaps even escape to London. Simon / Smule will draw others into his fantasies and make them do increasingly dangerous things.
Oh, so then it really becomes Hargreave House's problem if London starts getting pulled in. Okay, that's great. I love that.
Little Simon takes a carriage to London.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Oh yeah, Amanda brings up a good point. Like, what happens if this one becomes a servant? That would be a lot, right? Yeah, that would be really interesting. Fantastic. Okay, so then the dangers. I mean, you're on the hook for 3 dangers. What do we think so far? What do we have?
Well, we have the Scarwick estate itself, a moldering ancient country manor that creaks at all times. Rooms seem larger and smaller than they actually are. Don't go in the attic. The muddy lake is surprisingly deep, and the governess wasn't the first local to drown. Then we have shadows, impenetrable shadows that seek to pull the hunters into their deaths, getting lost in the hedge maze, shadows beneath the lake. At night, they may take on more predatory forms, like hands reaching from the dark corners of the estate waiting to take you, or even as phantoms in the shape of other characters or hunters. And then we have Sheraton Knowles himself, who will impugn the name of Hargrave House in London social circles if they air dirty laundry best left buried. I explicitly sent you to the country to deal with the children. I have no interest in dealing with more of them.
I like that you brought Sheridan in because it actually kind of, I like the sort of like bringing Sheridan in and kind of connecting it back to London as well. The connections back to London are fun. It makes it like much more like it ties into the campaign in a really interesting way. Fantastic. Okay, we will come back to this group for your clues, but for now, I thought that was really great. So bravo to that group for your fabulous introduction materials, your dangers and threats. Let's go to locations. This is my favorite thing to write when I'm writing a threat. I love writing locations. I like quotes too, but paint the scene questions are really fun. Locations group. Yeah, as much as you got written, tell us about it.
We've got a lot. We decided to just throw down whatever, and you can always edit it later.
Do you want to just go through? Do you want to just pick our favorites? Like, I don't want to take up too much time because we did write all 7.
I mean, you can if you want to give me like your 3 favorites, that'd be great. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, but if they're not super long, you can do as many as you want. Yeah,
We'll do 3. We want to hear about some stuff. So
okay.
I'll pick out my favorite, and then we can. Okay, so we did the schoolroom.
Okay.
On chalk drawing of a knight carrying a flag saying this is for you. Old King Smule on a slate. Dried paint spilled on a desk. A fairy tale book face down to bookmark the page. Paint the scene. What sorts of ways has Old King Smule has been using this space as a room to discipline servants and other guests who disobey his rule?
Good. Yeah, that's good. I love that because it like brings in the like kind of weird like kink elements that are kind of going on in the innocence, you know? So yeah.
Now, do you want to pick one out?
Yeah, I'm trying to decide which one. Sure. Let's do the hallways. Now this one gets to be fleshed out more. We didn't put a lot into this yet, but the long, creepy hallways. Electrical lights, but they're all out, and it's lit by sporadic candles. Worn carpet muffles your footsteps, and quiet noises echo throughout the house, carried through the hallways. Paint the scene during the day is what decorative items do you notice in the hallway? And in the night, it's in the dark, the hallways look different. What do you notice is missing or is now in the hallway after being in another part of the house?
Oh, nice. Good. Yeah, I like that. That's really good. Everybody's playing with the shadows idea, which is really great because I think it really pings on the movie too, but like in that sort of heightened supernatural way that the Between does it, you know, which I think is really terrific. Fantastic. Do you want to share one more?
Yeah, sure. I think if we can grab one that, because we were really trying to focus on is what does a grand home look like when it's only lived in by children, and what
Okay.
does a grand home look like when it's only lived in by children and also by Old King Smule? What would that do to a house? Maybe the study or the parapet?
Yeah, we can do the parapet. Rickety staircase leads to an overhead door. Birds roost in the corners. Open parapet looks over the grounds from all angles. Paint the scene. Someone plays a game with one of the house's servants. What are some of the details or cues do we see that the servant is not having any fun at all and is in mortal danger?
It's good. That's really good. Yeah, that's great. That's aces. I like that a lot. Fantastic. Definitely, I would love for you to share the rest of these in the Discord because the 3 you gave us are really, really terrific. We'll come back for your clues, but thank you very much to the locations group. Side characters group, share your favorite characters. Give us like 2 or 3 of them.
Got it. You want to go back and forth?
Yeah, like I'll pick one of mine, and I think Gloria Knowles, a precocious child, young girl, a magnet for dirt, bugs, and reptiles, a little short for her age. quote. How about this? I won't tell Miss Lintz that you were snooping, Mr. Lintz, that you were snooping around here, and you won't tell Miss Chambers I'm bringing worms inside again.
Nice, I like it.
All right, we got Gustav Lint, a gardener, stout, hands creased with soil, a resounding belly laugh that must be teased forth with sophisticated wit. Quote, Scarwick Manor is as alive as you or I, and I am tasked with tending all the flora that grants its first impression of grace and grandeur. It is not a duty for the faint of heart, I assure you of that.
Great quotes. These are good. Give us one more.
Olive Chambers, a cook, rolled up sleeves, a variety of aprons, proud of her job, the source of all the gossip. Tell little Gloria that if she brings whatever pet inside, I'm not feeding it. Them creatures are more crawly than the main house.
Fantastic, fantastic. Bravo to the side characters group. These are good characters. These are really good. Already more than the movie. So just with the 3 we got, the cast is bigger than the movie by a lot. Fantastic. Okay, so the unseen group. You were tasked with writing a special unseen for this threat. This is the most game design portion of the writing workshop. So let's hear it. What's the unseen? What are we doing here?
So, I mean, looking at the Selkie threat, like wanted to get to the idea of, yes, while they're in the country, then these other hunters that they would name would be covering for them, basically. The introduction that I came up with was, given you all are investigating in the country, several hunter acquaintances of yours have been invited to cover any insidious threats in London during your absence. What enticement do each of you offer your friend to do this for you? So that's the beginning of it. And then,
Nice.
like, the concept was to go through multiple nights, was to have each of the hunters name a hunter, name a London invited hunter, and then it would be just like a prompt, that hunter, a place, and a thing that they were chasing. So we didn't quite get to that point, like couldn't figure out how to explain it. So we just came up with some prompts that seemed kind of cool to at least like introduce like these these guest hunters
Yeah, let's hear
to
them.
go
Yeah.
through place. Yeah. So Ken, you want to read one of yours?
Sure. Racing around the cobblestone streets in pursuit of your reluctant informant, you're struck by a fading company advertisement. Old King Snuff's finest powder painted on the brickwork of the
nice.
decrepit
Good.
East End soot-stained factory wall. What about the painted mascot chills you to bone?
Nice. I like it.
One of mine is so just a random name, like Miriam Seasbury is trying to trudge through the sewers, stewing in her juices as well as London's, trying to track down the creeping musk. Why does she have a particular grudge against this threat?
Oh, nice. Good. Yeah, that's good. I like this approach because it's very it, what I find really interesting about all of this is what everyone's created is how much it does connect back to London. I find that really fascinating. Um, it's a fun avenue to explore because it's like this, the characters are isolated, but this is not happening in isolation, which I find really, really intriguing. Very, very cool. Anything else to share for the unseen?
I've got a couple more.
Sure. Yeah.
The dead fish and raw sewage smell of the docks fill your nostrils, and the low fog casts queer light over the black sea where you heard the splash. Jumping in to grab the floating figure, you turn it over, what makes you choke with horror. And then, having lost their quarry in the crowded noisome Piccadilly Circus at bustling midday, you are plunged deep amid hawkers and barkers into the cloying miasma of unwashed bodies, manure, and food stalls. Why is your attention suddenly drawn to the ragged mother holding her silent infant?
Oh, good. Yeah, that's really good. Nice, nice, nice. Fantastic. Awesome. I love it. This is really, really great. Okay. So let's talk about clues. I think that's the thing that we all have to kind of share here. let's go to the threat and dangers group. Read your clues to us, as many as you got done.
We have three. We have a children's book containing the tale of Old King Smule. Paint the scene. The book details several of Old King Smule's horrible deeds. Describe one of them. We have a spider-like figurine made cobbled together from pieces of porcelain dolls. And we have the burned remains of a poem Simon wrote to Miss Gibney.
Nice. Oh, it's really good. Yeah, I like that. That's a great, like, the innocence touch too. Fantastic. Locations group. What are your clues?
I'll do the first one. Two servants whisper about Old King Smule's honored guest that will arrive tonight.
We have a leather-bound schedule book with an unusual message on a date.
Then whispers from behind a closed door about Simon and Gloria's parents.
And a porcelain doll is dressed exactly like a hunter.
Oh, good. Nice. Thank you. And side character group?
All right. A carrier pigeon with a broken neck, only a fragment of torn paper remaining in its leg band.
I get the reference.
A writhing mass of insects crawling out of a hole in the ground, or a statue's mouth, or a kitchen pot. Take the condition, creepy crawlies.
Oh, yeah, good.
A cairn of stones in an unusual place, such as in the bathroom, on the dining room table, on top of someone's chest when they awake.
That's horrifying. It's good. I love it.
Like mud spread over a room, the words "I'm in power here" are cleaned away.
Mm. Nice. Very good. That's all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, an unseen group.
Ken, I actually came up with a fourth one, so I'll read that one first. Candelabra of 4 with flames that suddenly flare towards the ceiling, lengthening the shadows.
Nice.
And then another one that I came up with was a music box that trills out a sad ballad, but then slowly grinds into silence.
I think we also had a dollhouse that changes each time that you open it. And a children's slate tablet, but the writing is in ancient Aramaic.
Oh, nice. Good. That's a great clue for the initial question, right? That's awesome.
Like very hereditary vibes right there.
Yeah, I was gonna say we've got some hereditary shit going on. Yeah, that's really good. Fantastic. Well, we got a couple minutes. Let's talk about rewards. We know a lot more now about this threat and the characters in it, and we didn't get to see all the locations and side characters, but we got a good glimpse of them. We'll just call out rewards. Whoever think what would be a cool reward for folks. I think the 10 crown.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Simon's 10 crown has to be one, right? Yeah.
I think Sheraton Knowles would be like a good side character.
Good
Great
side
side
character
character.
reward. Just
Yeah.
totally aloof.
Yeah.
Like, just completely aloof.
Let's see.
What would he help with though? What would his bonus be?
I mean, he seems to be plugged in with London society.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe even
that
like
makes
if we want to
sense.
get real specifically, like queer London society.
That'd be pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
the dedicated bachelors of London.
Yeah, like
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Libertines. Yeah.
Yes.
I could even see like a mini move, like, oh, through Simon, you can spread a rumor about another side character.
Oh,
my
that's pretty
gosh.
good. Yeah.
Really good.
Social
That's
combat. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about a jar of the pond water with a leech in it?
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like a very romantic.
So useful.
vibe.
I'm thinking like the dollhouse, if
Yeah.
it survives.
that would be a good
That'd
one.
be cool.
with the
Yeah.
changing rooms. Yeah.
You could even add that to the clue, right? You could be like,
Mm.
you could either have the clue be like added to personal quarters, or
Oh, yeah.
or tie it to
Yeah.
rewards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
The fairy tale book about Old King Smule will be really good, especially if it gets all
Mhm.
Babadook and you can
Oh,
add
yeah.
things to it.
Yeah.
Babadook. Yes.
Mhm.
I like that we left a lot of space for like what Old King Smule is, right? Like I think that's really great. Like, so it will be really wide open if people play this threat, like to what Old King Smule's deal is. So it's
I think
pretty great.
another kind of like attachment to the one, like if the book was a part of the reward, maybe like even being able to summon Old King's Mule if you if you answer
yeah.
question 2, maybe that's part
yeah.
of the reward.
That's pretty
Yeah, I
cool.
was thinking if Old King's Mule is driven off from Simon, it becomes a reoccurring side character in
Yeah.
Hargrave House or something, you know, like do like the whole NPC list thing with it too and stuff.
Or it could be like an ongoing danger, like just
Yeah.
a free
Yeah.
floating danger. You know,
Yeah,
that could be
yeah.
fun because he's too
Yeah.
ancient for Hargrave House to fully banish. You know,
Yeah,
the best they can do is just unrest him from Simon, right? So
yeah,
that's pretty great. This was a lot of fun. Congratulate everybody, did a great job. Congrats on the writing.
That was great.
In
Awesome.
40 minutes, you all came up. I mean, this is like 90% of the way there to being like a done threat. So I hope at least some of you or all of you like finishes this and makes it a thing.
We want to compile everything into one document.
You all definitely
Yeah.
should. I'll leave that to you. I'm not gonna.
We can do that. Yeah.
I'm done from this point on, but I'll be happy to look at it when it's finished though. I think that'd be really great. Thank you all so much. I thought this was very successful. I really had fun with Terror Tuesday, kind of talking about this movie and doing some writing, and I'll look and see about future Terror Tuesdays. But with all that said, let's wave goodbye to anybody who's watching the video.